Hi folks, and welcome to a winter tour of the Highland Seedlings small holding, micro-small holding, tiny small holding, large garden. It's absolutely freezing today, but there's a bit of sunshine, and I thought I'd grab this opportunity to show you around, show you where we are, and in particular talk about what our space is like, how we're using it now, and how we're hoping to use it in the future, what our plans are for this year. So at the moment, it's very cold. The ground is pretty much frozen. In the greenhouse, it's cold and the soil is cold, but the plants are fine. They're in stasis. They're not growing much, but they're also not dying. And these are all plants that we're hoping to be eating maybe in March and April when it gets a bit lighter and a bit warmer. They'll start growing again, and there'll be lots of leafy greens here. We got this slightly wrong. We were hoping to be eating them now, but I was very, very tired last summer and I couldn't do it, and I couldn't sow things in time. I wasn't able to do that, and I wasn't able to plant out in time. So these are all later than they should have been. Next year, we're going to try and sow things in probably July, late June, July, and put them in the grow house in August, September, and hopefully that will get them big enough before it gets really cold so that we can continue eating them throughout. But you live and learn. Every year is different, and we never get it quite right. There's always something that doesn't work out at all. Last year, the weather was really interesting. We had the East Coast sea fog from about April to June, so the brassicas didn't do much, courgettes didn't get going, cucumbers didn't get going. But the leafy greens loved it. So the kale and the spinach and things were amazing. But the bigger things we really liked were a bit rubbish. But the Brussels sprouts did really well. We're just eating the last of them, but they've done way better than we expected. I wish I'd sowed more of them, but you always know that looking back. So at the moment, we largely grow in 3 big outside beds. And then there's a triangular bed, and there's some beds down the bottom that we built last year. So they're just coming into their own this year. And then we have these grow houses as well. The one I'm in now is in the process of being converted into a food grow house. So we've made the start of that. Half of it is now laid to beds, laid to food. The other half still has a desk and pots and things in, because this is where I used to do my seedlings. This used to be the nursery house, but that's now the one you can see behind me there. That's the nursery grow house, and I'll take you in there as well. That's got tables in. And then we've got 2 smaller polytunnel houses as well. They've not got anything in at the moment, but we'll be using them in the spring and the summer, to get crops of other things in as well, particularly tomatoes. They always need a lot of space, although some of that will be coming into this grow house as well. I'm thinking about experimenting with putting some miniature trees into the small grow house. It's sort of a bit of an unloved one. It's never worked quite right, and I don't know what it is about that, but it's not our favorite. So I was wondering about putting in like a miniature peach and a miniature nectarine and patio trees they're not bred to get too large, and see how they got on in there. If that bit of shelter helps them maybe give us some juicy fruit, which would be quite welcome. We have an orchard outside as well. We have a big range of fruit trees. Apples, plums, greengage, damson, pear. We've got pretty much all the things out there, and we've got patches of fruit bushes as well. And we need to tidy those a bit this year. The raspberries have taken over that patch, which means the blueberries and the currants and the gooseberries are not very happy, and they need to be removed and moved to a different area. So I'll show you around a bit, and I'll talk to you about what our plans are and what we're trying to do. This is the small orchard area of the garden. These are all smaller fruit trees that we've put in that are finding their feed, but they are doing mostly really well. And the intention is to keep those tiny and harvestable, as opposed to the bigger ones elsewhere that are just too big to harvest. Beyond the orchard is the woodland. And we put in this fence last year to keep the chickens on this side, but we're having thoughts about including the woodland in that a bit more so they can keep it a bit tidier. This is an area we've not done a lot of work on, but we're hoping to. And our next target is the pointless hedge in the middle. There was a hedge planted there many, many years ago that we inherited. We've cut it down, but we would like to remove this hedge entirely so that the space opens up and this lilac grove here becomes a bit more open. and we'll see how that goes. There's a lot of brambles here that you can see that will need to mattock out, and once they're gone, it'll be really nice to have this open space and help the fruit trees have more lights and more joy as well. The woodland is really, really good for bulbs, so we get lots of snowdrops, crocuses and daffodils and bluebells in here. So between now and June, this is going to be in flower, and the snowdrops are just coming out. And I can see the first daffodils shooting up there as well, and that's really, really lovely. Moving out of the orchard, we come to the elderflower patch. It's this giant thing here. This was a big, big rhododendron that we cut back when we first moved here. And we discovered two beautiful elderflowers in there, as well as lots of brambles and raspberries and other things like that. We put in some broom because it's really pretty. It's not been too invasive for us. They get really big like this, and then we cut them back. But we love the flowers. It makes us quite happy. But in here is the elderflowers. This one is this year's star elderflower. It's going to grow elderflowers all the way up. And this one was last year's star elderflower. So I cut that back really heavily in autumn, and it's gonna grow some this year, but it's just to keep it in check. And this year we'll be cutting that one back in autumn, and they take turns. So between them we have a good supply of elderflowers and elderberries. And we're hoping to get rid of some of these brambles because they're just taking over. It's all a bit too much, but the time to do that is probably now while we can get to them. But of course you only ever remember them when they have taken everything over and it's too late to get them out. Next to the elderflower patch is a herb bed. It never does well in the winter, but things come back. So it looks really rugged and unkempt just now, but it's going to do nicely. And there's still a bit of parsley there, and things are coming back. I have no doubt that they will do that because they do it every year. Tiny bit of time there as well. These tires here are mainly used for flowers, though we have grown carrots on them before as well. They did really nicely for flowers last year. This was our main sweet pea patch, and I'd like to have more of those because it's a really nice thing to come into the garden and look at that. Behind me are the main big three beds. There they are. They go this way, and there's three of them. The paths aren't very defined at the moment. You can just about make one out. There, that's a path, and then that's a path. But we put in this pallet fence last year to try and keep the chickens and ducks out a bit, and the dogs, and it did quite well. It did keep them out, but the door drove me nuts. It's too heavy for me to use. It's very hard to get in, and it also harbored a lot of slugs and snails, and it cast too much of a shadow. So we actually lost quite a lot of growing space next to the fence, and we didn't like that. So our plan this year is to go back to chicken wire on those electric wire fence posts, the plastic ones that jiggle in the wind. I'll keep the chickens and the ducks out and make it easier for me to get in. But this is sort of our main outside growing space. This is what we started with. If you watch the video from February 2 years ago now, 2019, you can see that's when we started putting that in. That's when we moved away from raised beds into this kind of thing. And it does really nicely. It's still got a few things in, and before the massive frost this last week, it had done well, but now they're all looking pretty sad, so we'll see what survives. But we've been eating kale and chard and spinach and things like that from out here, and that's done nicely, so we'll see how that goes. This structure here is for our beans, runner and French beans. It did really well last year, and it's still in good shape, so I think we're going to... This bed here is what we refer to as the triangular bed. It's triangular, well, it's not really triangular, it's just a weird shape. But one of the nice things about building your beds in a no-dig way is that you can build them into any shape you want. You're not restricted by amounts of woods you can get for the sides or by having right angles or anything like that. So any weird shape works. This bed isn't quite right for us. We're going to extend it and do something different with it. But it's worked well for the last couple of years, what we wanted with it. We had a lot of peas in here, a lot of lettuce and a lot of carrots, and that's done really nicely. I'll turn you around and show you our plans for this area. So this is the triangular bed. It looks quite sad and unkempt at the moment, but trust me, it was full of food. There's still some Brussels sprouts in there, the odd one there, and the odd one there that we enjoy eating. There's a cabbage holding on, and then there's some leeks there. They're still really small, but hopefully by March or April they'll do nicely. There's some strawberries in there. They shouldn't be there, they just arrived. And then down there is some kale, cabbage, kaleette things that we keep taking leaves off, and they'll get going again as well. But we're hoping to do more with this area behind it. So this is an unkempt area that's largely been overgrown, and we're hoping to remove some of the fruit bushes to it and make this more of a fruit patch. Maybe extend the triangular bed down a bit, maybe to where that ridge ends. Take out this giant rose that never flowers and is just really unhappy, and then have more fruit in beyond there, because this is the fruit patch. It's largely raspberries, and I've managed to cut about half of them back and the other half I didn't. But there's also like blueberries in there and lots of other things, and the raspberries just took over, and we love them and we're very happy with them. But it means we have to remove some of the other fruit bushes and put them over there next to the triangular bed where I've just shown you, and also tidy these a bit, the raspberries, in the hope that there'll be sort of, you know, straight lines that you can walk in between to make harvesting a bit easier. We get a really, really good harvest of these. They're very happy and very cheap to put in if you buy them as bare root plants, and they'll just keep going and going and going. And they're such a lovely thing, but they do take over if you're not careful. So they're wanting, here they're trying to grow outside their area, and they sneak into the vegetable beds as well around this side. They're wanting to grow, so this one's grown through, for example, so that's one we'll need to remove. And we're forever finding shoots in the vegetable beds down here as well, but it's easy enough to take care of that and get rid of them. Next to the fruit is a bit of an unloved, overgrown area with random shrubs. We're hoping to do something about them this year and have this as a bigger growing area. I want more strawberry beds, and I was hoping to extend the bed that just starts beyond there up to here, because this is full sun and it's a nice area for growing food in if we can manage it, and it's sheltered by the wall. That's quite nice. This is a bed we built last year for our potatoes, so now it's just going to be a normal bed. We could extend it further down, but this apple tree sheds its apples and it would shed it onto the bed, so we leave this as an area to sit in and for the chickens to enjoy when they're not locked in. This here is our perennial bed. The perennial bed is something we started last year because we needed a home for our asparagus. We've tried asparagus several times and we've never done very well with it because we've not really looked after it in the right way. So we thought we'd dedicate a whole bed to it, and that's what we've done. And then we started putting other perennial things in it as well. So at the moment it's got Jerusalem artichokes, regular artichokes, globe artichokes, and also some wandering onions in it. And we're thinking about adding some other perennial things as well, but it's primarily for globe artichokes and asparagus, both of which we really love. And we'll see how it does. We should be able to harvest the odd spear this year and then harvest it fully next year. We'll see how that goes. It looks a bit unkempt, but it's actually done really well. It's still got a defined path next to it. The chickens don't tend to break in. And yes, there's lots of weeds, but they'll pull out easily enough once the ground unfreezes. And it'll be fairly simple to get this back to usable, happy bed. Next to the perennial bed and connected with this arch is another bed down here. This is a teaching bed. We've been building this over a couple of years on different courses. Whenever we had people do a how to grow course, they build a bit of this bed. And I don't think we've put quite enough soil on because it's been really hard to weed it, and a lot of dock and stuff is in it. So this is one of my areas for this year to do slightly better, to put a border around it, put more flowers in, and just make it easier to traverse this one. You can see that for winter crops we tried to divide it into two bigger bits with a path in between. It's worked all right. There's still some leeks over there, some tiny ones and some bigger ones that are ready to harvest. And then some brassicas that have been ravaged by the pigeons, but I don't really mind sharing with them. So there's a potential of extending this bed further down towards the chicken. This chicken house can move and go somewhere else. And then I think we'll probably end up with a bed that follows the path, and that will be a nice area here for more food to go on. We grew some late peas here and they were absolutely delightful. They went out really, really late, and they've now gone over. But only just. You can see that this bit of it here, it's still holding on and has held on all through winter. And that's it, really. That's our space. We have done a lot of work over the last few years to try and figure out what works for us, what works well, what we want to do. And for us, producing vegetables with as little effort and as little energy as possible is kind of where it's at. So our space is never going to be pristine, it's never going to be neat, but it does its job and it gives us a lot of food. And even in a cold winter like this is the coldest winter up here in years, there's still bits of green to harvest and there's still greens for dinner almost every night. And that's something I'm really, really pleased with. We're going to try and be more efficient in our veg growing. We're going to try and get our timing slightly better. We're going to try and plant things in a slightly more effective way. And we're trying to get the autumn and winter and spring plants better so that we have a more reliable supply of food throughout the year. But it's all a bit of trial and error. What works one year doesn't work the next. What works for neighbors doesn't work for us, because the wind and the weather and just how things are. My energy levels drop in the summer because I'll have had a very busy spring and I'm just too knackered by the time August comes around. So that's something we have to keep in consideration as well, and we'll try and figure out how that works. But it's a very lovely space. It makes us very happy, grows a lot of fruit and veg, and it's a great example of just trying things out and changing them when it doesn't work and not feeling like you have to do everything at once. Start with a small bed and see where it takes you.